Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar of this month. And today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is organic and GMO foods. Does it really matter? Now, I'm just going to show you this cute infograph I found. I thought it was kind of funny. People who eat healthy, balanced meals, and the other part is people who wish this really was pie. Unfortunately, the healthy eating part of the population is small, but I'm so glad to be part of it. So, what is organic food? I kind of like this cute little saying here. Try organic food as your grandparents called it, food. Well, organic food is produced by farmers who emphasize the use of renewable resources and the conservation of soil and water to enhance environmental quality for future generations. So organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products come from animals that are given no antibiotics or growth hormones. Isn't this nice? Organic food is produced without using most conventional pesticides, fertilizers made without synthetic ingredients, or sewage sludge bioengineering, which is genetically modification, or ionizing radiation. Before a product can be labeled organic, a government-approved certifier inspects the farm where the food is grown to make sure the farmer is following all the rules necessary to meet the USDA organic standard. Companies that handle or process organic food before it gets to your local supermarket or restaurant must be certified too. And that comes from the consumer brochure of the USDA National Organic Farmer. And what's so crazy about this is that all these processes, all this certification means that organic food is much more expensive. I'd assume that it would be better for pesticide-laden food, for them to be the ones that are getting the certifications and the regulations. But unfortunately, it is not that way at the moment. I'm just going to show you this cute little slide. It says, if organic farming is the natural way, shouldn't organic produce just be called produce and make the pesticide-laden stuff take the burden of an adjective? The other thing is, every time you buy organic, you're persuading more farmers to grow organic, and that's from the Mother Earth News. So it is not news that organic farming beats conventional practices when it comes to the health of the environment. Previous research has established that organic food can pack more nutrients into the same piece of product than conventionally grown farmed foods. A recent study from Newcastle University found that the concentration of antioxidants like polyphenolics, sorry, I always have trouble with that one, in organic produce can be 18 to 69% higher than their non-organic counterparts. According to the Mayo Clinic, one of the main considerations in choosing organic food isn't the increased nutritional value, but rather the reduction in pesticide exposure. Organic food does indeed pose much smaller pesticide consumption risks, but what that does for our health, unfortunately, is still up for debate in the scientific community. We had recently a Swedish grocery chain called Co-op or Coop and the Swedish Environmental Research Institute, and they decided they wanted to have a look to see what would happen if some of their customers switched from a conventionally grown food to organic only diet. So they created a 21-day experiment with a family, the Palmberg family of 5, who had to eat a conventional diet for 1 week. Then all of the members of the family, they had to do a urine test where in their urine they found insecticides, fungicide, and plant growth regulators. Pretty gross if you ask me. Then the family switched to an organic only diet, and this included their personal care items, their soap. They did this for 2 weeks. During this organic phase, The researchers then took daily urine samples, and the results were dramatic. The pesticide load in the family members' bodies dropped in a way that were observable in just a single day. By the end of the 2 weeks, there were very little evidence of the pesticides and other compounds, chemical compounds, in their urine samples anymore. So, at the start of this experiment, the mum, Annette, she explained how her family had chosen to eat conventional food because it was much less expensive for their big family. However, she said she was reevaluating this trade off by the end of the experiment. When you hear this, you think about your children, she said. There are a whole number of chemicals removed from my kids' bodies, and I don't want them back. Well, I agree. I don't want those pesticides in my body either. Now, there's a great agency called the Environmental Working Group, and they have provided us some guides as to how consumers can avoid pesticides. So, we do know that people that eat organic produce eat lesser pesticides, a less amount of pesticides. A study by Cynthia Curl of the University of Washington, published just this year in February, found that people who reported that they always or often bought organic produce had significant organophosphate insecticides in their urine samples, even though they reported eating 70% more servings of fruit and vegetables per day than adults reported to rarely or never purchase organic products. There have also been several long-term observational studies that have indicated that organophosphate insecticides may impair children's brain development. Can you really put a price of these toxin exposures on our children? In 2012, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they issued an important report that said children have unique susceptibility to pesticide residues, potential toxicity. The pediatricians organization cited research that linked pesticide exposure in early life and pediatric cancers, decreased cognitive function, and behavioral problems. It advised its members to urge parents to consult reliable resources that provided information on the relative pesticide content of various fruit and vegetables. One of the key resources they did cite in this was the Environmental Workers Group shopping guide to pesticides in produce, and we are going to go through that today. So every year the EWG releases a shopping tool so that people can have the benefits of a diet rich in fruit and vegetables with less exposure to pesticides. So when they do their guide, they tested 3,015 products, and nearly 2/3 of these contained pesticide residues. And this was actually quite surprising because the consumer demand is demanding for food without agricultural chemicals. So the the EWG's shopping guide to pesticides in produce calculates that the USDA test found a total of 165 different pesticides on thousands of fruit and vegetable samples. American consumers are now purchasing and voting with their pocketbooks, demanding for produce with less pesticides. The USDA's Economic Research Services estimated that organically produced food sector, although it's just 4% of all US food sales, has enjoyed double-digit growth in the last few years. This trend is particularly strong for sales of organic fruit and vegetables. Okay, so the USDA's EWG's shopping guide to pesticides in produce recognizes that many people who want to reduce their exposure in pesticides in produce cannot find or afford an all organic diet. So it helps them to seek out conventionally grown fruit and vegetables that tend to test low for pesticide residues. When they want food whose conventional versions test high for pesticides, they can make an effort to locate the organic versions. Okay, so let's talk about the highlights of the Dirty Dozen. So this is the 12 produce items that contain the highest levels of pesticides, what they are for this year. So number one, it was apples, peaches, nectarines, strawberries, grapes, celery, spinach, bell peppers, cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, imported peas, snap peas, and potatoes. So each of these foods tested positive for a number of different pesticide residues and showed a higher concentration of pesticides than other product items. So if we have a look at just this infographic here, we can see an organic strawberry. You can see what its ingredients are. It comes from a strawberry plant. And then if we have a look at the conventionally grown strawberries, you can see the list of potential chemicals that it has in it. I know what I'd prefer my kids to be eating and myself to be eating. So the key findings were that 99% of the apple samples, 98% of peaches, and 97% of nectarines tested positive for at least one pesticide residue. The average potato had more pesticide by weight than any other product, so definitely a good one to buy organic. And a single grape sample and a sweet bell pepper sample contained 15 pesticides, and a single sample of cherry tomatoes, nectarines, peaches, imported snap peas, and strawberry showed 13 different pesticides apiece. So this is the third year that the Environmental Workers Group have expanded the Dirty Dozen to have a plus category, and this highlights two types of food that contain trace levels of highly hazardous pesticides. These are the leafy greens of kale and collard greens and the hot peppers. They were not they did not reach the criteria to be included in the Dirty Dozen, but they did contain really serious insecticides that are toxic to the human nervous system. And it is recommended that if you eat these foods, that you seek for organic ones only. I quite like these little cute graphics here. So amazingly, we've become a culture that considers Twinkies, Cocoa Puffs, and Mountain Dew safe, but raw milk and compost grown tomatoes unsafe. It shows you how dissociated we are becoming from our fruit, vegetables, and our whole foods. And I like the little one on the right, which says, "Are you guys European or something?" No, we're organic. Unfortunately, we're changing our foods. We're looking for what looks like perfect foods rather than looking for natural foods, healthy foods, foods which are rich in their nutrients and which are also devoid of harmful pesticides. So what are the Clean 15? The Clean 15 is a list of produce least likely to hold pesticide residue. So these ones, most of these I buy just conventionally grown, not organic. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, cabbage, frozen sweet peas, onions, asparagus, mangoes, papaya, kiwi, eggplant, grapefruit, cantaloupes, cauliflower, and sweet potatoes. And actually, we're going to talk about this list a bit more later because some of those foods are actually GMO foods. So I would always buy those organic. So relatively few pesticides were detected on these foods, and the test found low concentrations of pesticides on them. So the key findings were that avocados were the cleanest. Only 1% of avocado samples showed any detectable pesticides. Some 89% of pineapples, 82% of kiwis, 80% of papayas, 88% of mangoes, and 61% of cantaloupes had no residues. And no single fruit sample from the Clean 15 tested positive for more than 4 types of pesticides. Isn't that sad that even our most cleanest food still has pesticide residues in it? This is conventionally grown. Of course, multiple pesticide residues are extremely rare on Clean 15 vegetables. Only 5.5% of Clean 15 samples had 2 or more pesticides. So now we're going to be talking about GMOs. What are they? I thought this was kind of cute. Unfortunately, we're ruining our environment with genetically modified foods and crops. So a GMO, or genetically modified organism, is a result of a laboratory process where genes from the DNA of one species are extracted and artificially forced into the genes of an unrelated plant or animal. Just have a think about that. The foreign genes may come from bacteria, viruses, insects, animals, or even humans. So, what are the effects of these GMOs? I quite like this this little thought here. You thought animal testing was bad. Well, Monsanto tests on humans. That's right. We do not know the full effects that GMOs are going to have on us as humans yet. So this engineering process ensures that their crops are pesticide and herbicide resistant. This means they are engineered to resist heavy spraying, and guess what? These residues make their way to the food that we eat. So what kind of what kind of crops contain pesticides? Well, at the moment there are 8 commercially available pesticide crops, and the top 3 are my biggest ones of concern. The number 1 is corn. 88% of all corn crops are genetically modified, and the sad thing is that corn products are in 80% of processed foods in the supermarket. So you buy processed foods, there's a pretty good chance you're buying GMO. The second thing is soybeans. So 94% of soybeans grown within the United States are genetically modified. Again, soybean products contained in about 80% of all processed foods in the supermarket. Third one is alfalfa, and you may think, oh, I never eat alfalfa, but the problem with alfalfa is that it is the majority of the hay and the grass that feeds our beef. So the animals, um, the cows, they eat the genetically modified alfalfa, and it interacts with their bodies. The residues are stored in their fat and in their meat in their body, and those residues are transferred onto us. The fourth one is cotton. The fifth is sugar beets. Well, I try and keep away from sugar anyway, so that's not an issue. 6 is canola oil. 90% of canola oil is genetically modified. Hawaiian papaya, this one was a surprise for me, and 8 is squash. So GMO foods are a non-negotiable in my house. When I'm out, when I'm at other people's houses, I try to avoid them, but sometimes they're unavoidable. So why are GMOs bad for us? Why should we be trying to avoid them? Well, the first thing is that they are unhealthy. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine urges doctors to prescribe non-GMO diets for all their patients. They cite animal studies showing organ damage, gastrointestinal problems. So just so you know, the glycophosphates, they create inflammation and holes in gut linings. They create leaky gut. They create problems with the immune system disorders. So these leaky guts allows molecules of food to enter bloodstreams, and your body initiates an immune response against itself. They also accelerate aging. They create infertilities. Human studies show that genetically modified food can leave material behind inside us, possibly causing long-term problems. So genes inserted into genetically modified soil, for example, can transfer the DNA of bacteria, transfer into the DNA of bacteria living inside us, and that the toxic insecticide produced by GMO corn was found in the blood of pregnant women and their unborn fetuses. This is really concerning. Numerous health problems have increased after GMOs were introduced in 1996. The percentage of Americans with 3 or more chronic illnesses jumped from 7 to 13% in just 9 years. Food allergies have skyrocketed. Disorders such as autism, reproductive disorders, digestive problems, and others are on the rise. There is not significant or sufficient research to confirm that GMOs are a contributing factor. But doctors groups such as the AAEM tell us not to wait before there is significant evidence, but start protecting ourselves now, and especially our children who are at more risk. The American Public Health Association and the American Nurse Association are amongst medical groups that condemn the use of growth of genetically modified bovine growth hormone, because the milk from these treated cows has more of the hormone that is linked to cancer. Okay, a second reason to avoid GMOs is that they create contamination forever. So GMOs cross-pollinate and their seeds can travel. It is impossible to fully clean up our contaminated gene pool. The potential impact is huge, threatening the health of future generations. GMO contamination has also caused economic losses for organic and non-organic farmers who struggle to keep their crops pure. Okay, the third reason is GMOs increase herbicide use. So most GMO crops are engineered to be herbicide tolerant. Um, they Monsanto use Roundup-ready crops, and they designed to survive several applications of their Roundup herbicide. Between 1996 and 2008, US farmers sprayed an extra 383 million pounds of herbicide on GMOs. The overuse of Roundup, results in superweeds which are resistant to the herbicide. This is causing farmers to use even more and more toxic herbicide every year. Not only does this create environmental harm, but GM foods are containing higher and higher residues of toxic herbicides. Roundup, for example, is linked with sterility, with hormone disruption, with birth defects, and with cancers. Okay, genetic engineering creates dangerous side effects. By mixing genes from totally unrelated species, genetic engineering unleashes a host of unpredictable side effects. Genes are inserted into our plants and create problems such as the creation of new toxins, and then when we eat them, they create allergens, carcinogens, and nutritional deficiencies. Okay, so the other problem with GMOs is that independent research is attacked and suppressed. So scientists who discover problems with GMOs have been attacked, gagged, fired, threatened, and denied funding. The journal Nature acknowledged that a large block of scientists denigrate research on other legitimate scientists in a knee-jerk, partisan, emotional way that is not helpful in advancing knowledge. Attempts by media to expose problems are also often censored. A big problem is that GMOs harm the environment. GMO crops and their associated herbicides can harm birds, insects, amphibians, marine ecosystems, and soil organisms. They reduce biodiversity, they pollute water resources, they are unsustainable. So just an example, GMO crops are eliminating habitat for monarch butterflies, whose populations are down 50%. Roundup herbicides have been shown to cause birth defects in amphibians, embryonic deaths, and endocrine disruptions and organ damage in animals, even at a very low dose. GMO canola has been found growing wild in North Dakota and California and threatened to pass on herbicide-tolerant genes onto these weeds. Okay, so I like this image here. If GMOs are safe, why not label them? If they feel they feel their science is so strong, let's be upfront about it. So hopefully I've given you some great information here as to what decisions you should be making with your fruit, vegetable, with your animal proteins. GMO free and organic is always the best. If you cannot afford a full organic diet, then please make sure you hop onto the Environmental Workers Group's website and make sure you memorize or write down that list of the clean 15 and the dirty dozen so that you can make the best decisions for your family. And thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great month.